As we shift gears from talking about immigration and industrialization to talking about the history of discrimination in the early parts of the United States, we're going to first focus on discrimination towards Native Americans, those folks who were first here. And really, you spent a lot of time, I'm sure, in eighth grade history and in history classes before then, talking about some of the things that happened. What we want to look at in this little episode is the idea of Indian removal. And the idea that we're going to take these Native Americans from where they're living and move them out of the way, really in the name of progress, right? I think I showed you this painting earlier in one of these talks. But if I didn't, or if you don't remember, it's called Manifest Destiny. Manifest Destiny was the idea that the United States is meant to stretch from ocean to ocean. And because of that, we kind of said, hey, if this is what we're meant to be doing, we're going to get anybody and everybody out of our way. So if you look at the far left of that painting, you can see the Native Americans, the buffalo, who are being moved off by the settlers, the stagecoaches, eventually trains coming underneath this angelic figure of divine providence, right? That this was meant to stretch. And so what we're going to be seeing, a lot of this is going to happen in the 1800s with Native Americans. So let's take a look at what's going on really east of the Mississippi. Then when we talk about the Indian Wars, in another topic, we'll go west of the Mississippi. There are 5 big tribes of Native Americans who are going to be east of the Mississippi: the Cherokee, the Creek, the Choctaw, the Chickasaw, and the Seminole are those tribes. Now there are smaller tribes. There are offshoots of these tribes that are going to be there, but for the most part, these are the dominant tribes in the 1800s east of the Mississippi. Even at this time, these tribes were recognized by the United States governments as governments in their own right, and so they made treaties with each other, usually treaties that ended up getting broken, but they are going to make treaties with each other. But these are the folks that we're going to be checking out. Some of them you'll recognize the names. Obviously, the Seminoles were from Florida. If you're a college football fan, the Florida State Seminoles, right, are a team that's pretty good down that way. The Cherokee Indians had a presence here in southern Indiana, where we live, and so that may be one that you're a little more familiar with as well. What's going to happen is, as the land starts to fill up, as people start to move across the Appalachian Mountains into kind of the area of the country where we live, there's a great desire for farmland. The main way people are going to make money during this time, this is before industrialization, so is in agriculture. And these Native Americans are living on some of the best farmland in the United States, especially in the southern part of the United States at this time. But for most of them, they're not farmers. They're hunters-gatherers, that sort of thing. And so it was easy for these people to look and say, well, they're wasting these valuable resources that could be being put to better use. So that was one excuse. Thomas Jefferson himself talked about the need to civilize these Native Americans, to get them to assimilate into American society, to Americanize these folks, to bring them into line with kind of the cultural beliefs of the time. That goes against, if you remember last unit, we're talking about this idea of the melting pot and coming in. Really, for a lot of these folks, they were going to expect them just to kind of dump the way that they were living their lives, to speak English, to wear American-style clothing, have American-style dwellings, do that style of jobs. And so basically what they're saying is, our way of life's better than this way of life that you've got going. We expect you to change. Andrew Jackson hero of the Battle of New Orleans, later to be president of the United States, gets a reputation for being very hard on Native Americans. And he gets that reputation really after the Battle of New Orleans. He's got a group of soldiers who are with him. At the request of the president, he's going to march those soldiers into Florida to quell some Indian uprisings that are happening there. And so really you start to see a lot of these tribes in the Georgia and Alabama area who are forced to move. Basically, the idea was, well, hey, you come in, you try and negotiate a treaty with these tribal leaders, and you say, okay, well, can we bribe those guys, or can we convince them to move somewhere else if we give the whole tribe something? But if that doesn't work, it's armed force. We're going to take you out. Just the Creeks alone in that area of the country are going to give 22 million acres of land to the United States. And so the idea is you guys leave, and then now what's going to happen is we're going to bring some folks in to settle those lands, to farm them, and that sort of thing. Like I said before, this was this idea of manifest destiny. And so during the 10-year span from 1814 to 1824, most of the land in what we consider to be the southern part of the United States today comes to the U.S., and Native Americans are going to voluntarily move out west. Out west, for most of them, is going to mean just crossing the Mississippi River into what today we would consider to be Arkansas, Louisiana, that sort of thing. There were an awful lot of these members, though, that instead of leaving home, stayed and tried to basically assimilate into white culture. And there were acts of Congress. The Dawes Act is one that jumps to mind, that encouraged this, that actually if the Native Americans would try to do this, that they would be given money or land, clothing. Their children would be taken to schools where they'd be taught American history and English and those sorts of things, really trying to make them, help them become members of the larger American culture. But at the same time, you're leaving behind a lot of these rich traditions that your ancestors would have had. So you're leaving a lot on the table doing something like that. The Indian Removal Act is signed, and President Jackson is going to use this basically to say, all right, anybody that's not gone, you're going to be gone soon. Basically, the act said that the president had the power to negotiate treaties with any Native American tribes, and Jackson wasn't much of a negotiator. It was going to be his way or the highway when that comes in. And so really by 1837, you're talking 25 years before the Civil War, most of these Native American tribes are gone from east of the Mississippi. The ones that aren't gone are the ones, like I said, who have tried to assimilate into white society. The group that holds out the longest are these Seminole Indians that are in Florida. Florida, of course, before had been under the control of the Spanish, but after the War of 1812, that becomes part of the United States. The Seminole Indians put up a good fight. They're excellent fighters, and the terrain of Florida is really going to help. If you remember back when we were watching The Patriot, one of the things that made Benjamin Martin so effective and his troops was this type of guerrilla warfare that he was engaging in. And so the Seminoles knew that ground better than what you would see, than what the American soldiers would have. And so it allows them to hang on maybe longer than what we might think. There's some very shady things though that the Americans do as part of the Seminole Wars. I'm going to include a video on the playlist for this one to show you a little bit more, give you a little bit more background into some specifics that are going on there. when you look, kind of the last big tribe that's going to move are the Cherokee. I've got a map here for you. Cherokee, North Carolina is actually right across the Smoky Mountains from Gatlinburg. So maybe you've been there at some time. But where a lot of these folks are gonna go are going to be living, and then they're moved out west, as you can see here, into western Arkansas and eastern Oklahoma. Don't know if they know Joseph and Shannon or not, but Joseph and Shannon would have been out there a few decades later. As they are moving, these are the different routes that they would take. The most famous part of that is something called the Trail of Tears. And it becomes known as the Trail of Tears because on this forced march, 4,000 Cherokee will die before they reach these new homelands, of cold, hunger, disease on the road, bad nutrition, mistreatment, those sorts of things. And I've got a video that I'm going to put up on the playlist for you too, of the Trail of Tears. So be sure to take a look at that as well. Not a very bright spot in our history, in our dealings with these Native American groups. And again, there's all kinds of justification these people have, but really a lot of it boils down to the idea of their cultures weren't seen as being as advanced as the culture of the United States at this time, and so it was almost okay to do this to quote unquote savages. And today, I think, as we reflect back and we look, we understand that those actions weren't the actions that should have been taken, but at the same time, it's a part of our history. And so, really, kind of pre-Civil War, most of these Native Americans, the ones that haven't tried to join in with the United States, are now gone. And so post-Civil War, we're going to take a look next time at some of the conflicts the United States will have with some Native American tribes that are out west.